Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. This show is about real talk, real growth, and giving you tools that you need to lead others. I'm trying out different taglines.
That's terrible.
I like that.
I think it was good. We'll workshop it in future episodes.
Okay.
Welcome back. Today we're back with the crew. Usually it's Bold Friday, but it's Wine Friday apparently today.
Well,
how's everybody feeling?
Yet.
We got Eric, Austin, Mary, myself, Connor. How's everybody feeling?
You're asking me on a Friday afternoon how I'm feeling? Giggly.
Giggly. Very cool. Well, we just finished our EOS webinar, which is related to this topic tangentially. We're talking about change management today. And we're going to talk about over the next couple of episodes. We have Jen Bagley joining us from CI Web Group next week to talk about how she manages change within her own organization and how she's learned to do that over the years. So this episode is really an intro into that topic. What do we mean when we're talking about change management? What are some tools that you guys have seen over the years to be effective in change within the organization? And so, and then we'll round out kind of these series of episodes with, like I said, EOS, and what does that mean? What is Driven doing with EOS and all that exciting stuff coming up? So, so who wants to take the floor? Get us started here with the topic of change management.
Well, we're going to change it up, and I'm not going first today.
Oh, I usually go first.
Well, in the spirit of change, Eric normally says he goes first, and Mary said she's not going first, so I guess it's me.
What do you got,
let's do
Austin?
It's interesting when you say change management, it's often referred to as a negative connotation, or it's this kind of theoretical word, and it's hard to apply, and it's something that is really ambiguous in a business.
Yeah.
And my experience with it is a little bit different from coming from the Chick-fil-A world and how they manage change. They're one of the organizations that changed constantly, but it was never viewed as a negative, which was an interesting dichotomy. And I think everything in change management really shifted for me when I went to the support center. And they have the support center on the left, and then right across the way is called the hatch. And that is where all change happens. Or hatches like an egg. Doonch. You get it? Like hatches. Anyway, that's why they call it the hatch. Ideas hatch. I don't know. Incubate there, whatever. So it really just showed me and really has developed interestingly through the course of the years, working with different entrepreneurs, working in different capacities, being able to take the overarching theme of what they did. They didn't apply EOS. They didn't do all of these things, but there is a backbone system that's operating, and really it's just a clear process. And when people think about change, it's hard. When people think about change, they get uneasy, which I think Mary has, a lot on that to talk about. And we discussed that through a lot of our classes through the change curve and things. But as a management system, really change becomes easy when there's a process that ushers it in and gives people clear expectations to make it happen. And no matter what organization you're in, if those two things exist, change does become less of a hurdle to jump and to make happen.
Yeah, I'm glad you started there, because change, like you were saying, like change is scary, but for me, it comes down to identifying people's philosophy behind change. Like, what are the feelings that brings up when it's like, oh, we're going to come in here and change the way you do it. Like, there's a philosophy of it being chaotic, or there's a philosophy of it being structured and it being controlled. And yeah, Chick-fil-A absolutely had the philosophy of change, of it being intentional, controlled, and structured. So yeah, that's a pretty important place to start.
Organizational change is different for every person in the organization, and there's a lot of factors that play into it.
Yeah.
But I think where you start with change is, what are we dealing with, right? You got somebody comes in and they've spent their life and they associate with change something negative. So it's instability, it's frustration, it's negativity. They need a plan. They need to know what's around the next corner. They function better in that context. And then there's people that they view change quite positively. They view change as being innovative and different and being unique and cutting edge and whole bunch of things that go there.
Oh, stop it. You're
Or-
making me blush.
or they view change as the ability to control and to dictate and be significant, and those could be positive or they could be negative, right? There's different angles on change that people walk in with. So you take let's take us four, some change needs to happen in the organization. And when I say needs to, yeah, right. So we already talked about, we're introducing EOS. We've been doing all these things and it's causing major change in our organization. But if it's controlled and systematic change and we know the why behind it, and we were part of choosing that change, then we typically manage it easier and we go faster through it. Yeah. However, if change is thrust upon us, I don't buy into it, and I struggle with change, we now have a nightmare situation going on within organizations. And so change management is, go ahead, what were you saying?
Well, I was going to say, I would say that a lot of like mid-level managers fall into that category of change being thrust upon them. They don't know the conversations that have happened. They're not bought into it, and it's chaos. It would get that feeling of chaos for them.
Yeah. So it's when you have somebody that values something is important to them, like their job. And let's take a merger and acquisition situation. One company buys another company, and they now have a different culture that's coming in. They have different processes they're supposed to do. You buy that company, and then all the people that are in the company that remain are supposed to just adopt this new system. Well, they didn't agree to be bought by anybody else. They didn't agree to new systems. They like the way it is. They're loyal to the old everything. And now you're forcing them in. If you want to stay here, you've got to move in this direction. And so their choices are, I must surrender to this, or I must basically rebel and fight against this, which could be lead everything to leaving the position. And if I surrender to it, it either means something at home is more important, my kids, my family, and so I will surrender and I'll move in this direction, or I don't really care about the job enough to really, it doesn't matter to me or how we go about it, and I just shift. And so most of the time in a merger and acquisition, what you're left with, or you may have agreed upon some key roles that have signed contracts, but outside of that, you've got a group of people that are sitting there going, well, is it worth surrendering to or not? Most of the time it's a not, but they're not willing to give up. And so you get this rebellious thing that goes on and you have trouble with change. And it's an obvious example, but there's micro versions of that all over the place. You know, a manager comes in and says, hey, we're going to change this process. They didn't include them. They didn't explain the why. They just autocratically came in and said, hey, we're going here. And as soon as you tell someone what to do, they didn't get say in it, and it's forcing change that they didn't buy into, you are now struggling and you start going into the change curve.
Well, and I think about change. I mean, change is literally everywhere. It's every day. And I think too that when it comes to change, is it happening to us or is it happening for us? And to some of your points, do we know why? Why is it necessary? A lot of times within change, if we can plan and prepare and we know it's coming, and we communicate often and over communicate and communicate the whys, it helps ground people. This is where, when we talk about the inner metrics, understanding people's personalities, some people love change because they get bored in the routine, and they're like, sometimes they create change just to create change. Yet that's not the majority of people. They need to know why. And a lot of times their value is in what they do, and they know how to do it well. And so when change happens, it could be a system. We work with companies that all of a sudden are now integrating Salesforce, and they've never used Salesforce, or different things. Service Titan, right? And it creates the fear. So we talk about the imposter syndrome, and underneath there's all these different fears. Well, I'm not good enough. I feel stupid. Why are we doing this the way that we did before? It worked. And if people can create buy-in and be a part of it, it helps alleviate part of what the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Well, you went exactly where I wanted us to go. And I know Eric wants to bring in the change curve in a minute, but I want to talk about like the leader's role within change in a company, because Eric talked about this at the top, like, a top group of leaders can all get on the same page. They have that meeting, but then implementing it within the company. Mary hit like communicate, understand people's personality, get buy-in. What are some other things that are the leader's responsibility to effectively communicate and initiate change within a business?
I think bring peace. I think it's underlooked a lot of times, the importance of being a stable force in the midst of chaos. If I have trust, most of the time when you see trust issues come up in a company, it's in the midst of change, because I'm bringing some change, and now I don't know if I can trust you, and I'm not there. When we've brought change in any organization, whether it's through Driven or in previous companies or myself and leaders or watching other leaders do it, if there's a high level of trust with the team and the leader is stable and confident, not dictating it, but stable and confident and bought in to the decision as well, there's a high level chance that is actually going to become a successful change initiative rather than a failed change initiative or cause massive chaos in the midst of it. And so for me, bringing peace is massively important in the midst of change. And I think as what's interesting is I may not be the greatest person to be on this podcast. I may need to click off here, because what I just realized is I haven't really had a lot of change happen to me. I am normally the person bringing the change.
No, it's true.
And creating
change agent,
and creating the what's happening. And so I was thinking about it as you were talking, Eric. I was like, I've never really had that happen to me before. I don't really know how that feels. And I was just thinking,
But if you think about the pandemic, so COVID, change happened for every single person.
Yeah.
And we had to pivot and shift.
I think when you've been in spots of heavy change, I just think you potentially have a really strong reaction to it. It would be my guess, Austin. And so you're not in it very long. You're like, I'm not sitting in this for very long, and you're not dictating where I go. We're gonna figure this out.
Yeah, normally I just become the Tasmanian devil and just spin my way out of it. I'm like, if I can spin faster than whatever's spinning on top of me, then we're gonna get out of this quicker than whatever happens. And so I don't necessarily view it. I don't necessarily view it as it's happening to me. And I say that not to bring it about me here, but I think if you're in a position like that and you are normally the one bringing change, I think it just take a moment to even introspectively look at about that. Because I mean, I think, Mary, you're talking about understanding change, and Eric, you're talking about that, and just caused me to look inwardly and go like, hey, what's my relationship?
What I believe is happening there is you have a generally positive association with change. And so when change is happening to you, you're generally see the positive in it. And so there's not this disruption. You don't feel all the things. When a change is happening to you, and it's not your choice and you have to go through it, you manage it. I just don't think you're putting it in the category of change, because change is positive things. But when things are coming at you that aren't so positive and they're requiring you to change, I don't know that you're latching on and putting it in that bucket. It's just I don't see it. You deal with it a little different. At least what I've noticed in this span of time we've gotten to work together is that you are generally very positive on change. But let's use Mary's example, right? So let's use COVID, because we all went through that change. It happened to us. Yeah. And is it time to bring in the change curve, and I can talk to that, or no?
Yeah, go for it. Unless anybody has any other tools on what the leader's role is in change. Yeah, I think we can go into.
Well, I think we need to understand it first. I think understanding what the change is, and then we can bring in tools.
So crazy thing is, I mean, when you're talking organizationally, every company is all the time going through change. It's happening all the time. How do we manage it? What do we associate with it? Who are the people involved with it? How is it important to it? All these things will create this variability as to if it's throwing people into a crazy turmoil or not. And COVID's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a change we can all relate with. We all had to go through it. It was thrust upon us. We weren't a part of the decision-making as to whether we went through that change. And then the rules were done autocratically to the point where people are still pissed about it. I mean, people are still frustrated about what we went through, which I get. Yeah. But the change curve, and the one we're talking about specifically, is the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it's 7. I believe it's 7. The one I usually work with 7. I just pulled it up online.
Oh, 7, yes.
Yeah, it is 7. So there are 7 points in that change curve. And it's drawn, and we'll have a diagram that Connor will throw in here, but there is it looks like it's this line, and you know, step 1, step 2, step 3. That's not how this works. It goes step 1, and it may just circle and do step 1, and you do that 5 times, and then you go to step 2, and then back to step 1, and step 3, and it's like you can get caught up in here, and especially in the middle. So it starts with shock. So if you can, think back to COVID, and it's like, this is happening, the world's shutting down, and all that's going on. Mary was in a bowl class while it's happening. I had no way to contact her, right?
Yeah. With no phone.
Right. And because the phone was broken that particular class. They had no way in or out. So she comes out, and I'm like, hey, whole world changed. I'm hoping you can get home. Okay. So that's where we're at. She did manage to get home. And just going through it, and I still remember, she's like, what? And there's like this kind of, what, WTF, what's going, like there's this, and a lot of times shock.
Can't go to school. I'm like, what? It's like you're not even processing. I couldn't even process what was happening.
And most of us, you'll go through some phase of shock. Shock could be a split second. It could be longer. It could be recirculating shock. It's like, it can happen in many ways. But bottom line, a lot of times, and in her case, she got through the shock part pretty quick, but it took a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then you move to denial. Okay.
Fake news.
She was like, you're just messing with me because I'll do that. You're messing with me. This is total crap.
You just joke about global pandemics in your house?
I don't think
hey, Mary, guess what happened today?
I don't think this joke hits as well after we went through one. Okay. But the joke prior to that might have actually been funny. But anyway, so you go into denial. And I'll tell you, you think about COVID in general. There are people that are still in denial that it happened. Okay. Not that we all had to go through all that, but that didn't. Okay, fair. So, you know, so were people actually getting sick? Was it real? Was the vaccination real? Was it good for? I mean, like, there's a million different things. Not wanting to get in those discussions, but we go through this denial space, and then it moves from denial, and it may go back to shock, or it might move forward into frustration. Mm-hmm. So the way the change curve works is you got shock. Denial actually goes up a little bit. You get kind of animated usually in denial. And frustration can go inward. It connects into, it's not quite depression, but there's an anger to it. It's like, God, I can remember having no contact with anybody, being by myself.
You bought so much wine.
Yeah, we did buy a lot of wine.
It was wine. Like, I think
every day. And toilet paper. Toilet paper.
It was wine year, which was great. So, anyway, so you get into frustration where I can't produce. Things aren't working right. It doesn't go the way I want it to. There's anger attached to it. We're blaming. We're, every excuse in the world's coming out, and we're in that space of frustration, and it's kind of taking us over. And again,
can I pause you for a second there too?
Yeah.
In that place, all we want to do is we want to be safe. We want to be stable. In human nature, we know the emotion of anger. And a lot of times within change, we feel that frustration, we feel that anger, and because we know it, it actually creates some type of a stability for us. I just had to add that.
No, it's great.
You'll see people in a change curve, and they keep going back into anger and frustration because they get that. They feel, they know that feeling.
It's easier to act in that space.
Yep.
Yeah. So we get into frustration, and again, I want you to think about COVID. Think about the people you know. There are people still in frustration. They're still there. They didn't move on. And then they get in frustration, and then they go back into denial, and then they're moving back and forth between them. And they're still there years later. Okay? Next step, you don't have to go through all of these in massive detail. They can be quick and you can move on. They can be long and recirculating. The next one is depression. So it's where it's like there's no hope. It's like we've been in this space. Are we going to be locked in our houses forever? Is it, I mean,
our kids aren't learning online. This is stupid. They're so far behind.
We start to shut down. We start to remove ourselves. We start to give up. We start to stop caring about things that are important to us in deep depression because we feel like we're handcuffed and we can't move on. We can't do anything. And so now that's the downside to the change curve. And that's the first 4. And then the last 3 I'll cover pretty quick. It's experiment, it is decision, and it is integration. So we start to experiment, we start to make some decisions that are moving us out of this place, and we really start to, once we're there, we start to integrate this new change that we're going through into making it a habit and making it a life. And always the question comes down to, what is the difference between depression and moving into experiment and all these positives as we're coming out of it? And it all comes down, the word I connect to it is hope.
Mhm.
It's always that I can view somewhere in the future, it's going to be better than it is now.
Yeah.
And as soon as we get into that space, we can start to work our way out of the situation. And what people do, the heavy depression, is they have no hope. And what they do is they keep recirculating. I'm not going anywhere. It's not going to get anywhere. And so we're just sitting in it. We're sitting in it. And so we don't get out. So anyway, that was a change curve. I just want to touch on it.
So do you know, I've never seen this. I pulled it up when you were talking about, but you know the other model that Kubler-Ross developed, right? And it's almost identical
stages
to this.
It's
the
the
stages
same.
of grief.
It is.
Yeah, which is kind of hilarious that the stages of grief and the stages of change are so related.
They
like
are.
people feel these emotions when there's big or small change is happening. Obviously, like you said, the speed at which they run through the stages can differ. But
so
all
all that
funny.
are just listening to this, every single one of us, when he said it's hilarious when somebody's going through the stages of grief, we all looked at him like, what?
It's funny that they're related like that, where it's like you feel the same thing. Whether it's grief or just
you
change.
think about it though. You think so within change.
Am I a terrible person?
No. I just need to associate to people that you aren't a terrible person going, oh, their grief is really funny. But
not like ha funny, like hee funny, you know?
Yeah. What were you saying, Mary?
For change, for some people it is grief, especially when their stability has been rocked. Mm-hmm. When they have a clear direction, and you think about companies that are in acquisition and mergers, right? And there's a person has worked with this company. They are going to live and die with it. It's a mom and pop shop, and they know who they are. And all of a sudden, a PE group comes in, buys the company out, changes everything, and their identity and their core stability has been rocked. Mm-hmm. So it's a grief. It is what happened. There's a loss. And if they don't know why, if they can't buy in, you will see that person get stuck in the cycle, more or less, of the frustration and then the depression, the frustration and the depression. It's not what I love what Eric said, hope, because that's always what goes through my mind. Once people have hope, they can change. They can think a new thought. But if they do not have hope, they can't get out of it because all their focus is on is what's not working.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you said that. And to bring it back to the hilarious connection between the two,
the
is the hee funny, not the ha funny. But
we don't give you enough shit, Connor. This
is really in the reality that, and I'm going to bring it back to when it comes to business or change management in general, because I think it's going really personal. But you talked about this earlier, Connor, and the role of a leader is to not view change as losing something, because that's the difference. If I view change as a gain of some sort, that's buying into it. I'm buying in because I see the hope and I see the idea that something is there to gain from this change. However, a lot of leaders frame change or fail to frame change as that. And so therefore it's always pulling away from someone. And that is when someone gets into a negative spiral or grief or what.
To help frame that is, I buy into change when I'm part of the decision for the change.
Sure.
So I know that's not always possible, but as much as we can, this moves back into when we have a democratic leadership style. And that's not a political statement. It's a business school statement. It is a more inclusive style of leading through collaboration. It is, hey, we got a problem, put it up on the board, and we're working through the problems on a weekly basis as a team. We start to go, okay, here's the difference. To give you an example, I'm a manager. My boss comes in and goes, hey, I got a new person starting on Friday. I'm putting them under you. You're in charge of them. You better make them successful because we need this to work.
Yeah.
Okay. That's one. Okay. That's autocratic. Here's where it is. I don't know why. I wasn't involved in this. I have all this stuff scheduled next week. I'm like, what are you talking about? I got to hit deadlines. I got this going on. You want me to train somebody? I don't have time for this. Right. But now we switch that. We have a meeting beforehand. We go, hey, we have a real problem happening over here in this department and it's not working. And we need somebody trained up on these skills as fast as possible. How do we do it? And I raise my hand and I go, you know what? I don't have a lot of time next week other than Thursday and Friday. But if we get them in Thursday, Friday, I can start working with them. We can get them there in 2 days and I'll have somebody for you. I just volunteered myself for the exact same thing I was told to do. Mm-hmm. But now I'm not in hijack mode. I'm not pissed off. I feel respected. I feel part of what's taking place. And I'm going to put everything I got into that person versus sitting there going, yeah, you're here. You're just going to follow me around because I don't even have time to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge difference.
Yeah. And so, people go, well, what do I do? Okay. I'm in the change curve or I've got a change coming up. What do I do? What are the actions that I can take that are connected to it? And this is going to be a big bucket, but the word is over communicate. I guess there's several words, but it is people need to hear things at least 7 times before they get it. And when somebody goes into shock and denial in all these places, they hear, hey, we're turning left. And what did they hear? They didn't hear any details. They didn't hear what's going on. They may not even heard what's happening. Yeah. They didn't really get it. And a lot of people they live in denial. Oh, they didn't really say that. They were joking. We're not doing that. And so they got to hear it multiple times. Yeah. Questions have to be answered. If they can be involved in the decision, if you can give them advance notice after the change happens or while the change is going on, we're talking, we're communicating, we're asking how it's going. How can I support you? We're offering help through the whole thing. And you go, well, I don't have time for all that. Well, then you don't have time for the change to be done right, because what you're going to get, you're going to lose all that time with frustrated, depressed, people afterwards. And then you go, well, I don't get why change is so hard in this organization. Nobody seems to want to change. Well, you suck at doing change.
Yeah. And it's bypassing the uncertainty that happens. Like it's almost, you're almost bypassing that shock value by over communicating. It's like, because like you said, if you come in and drop on somebody, hey, you got a new hire coming in Monday, they're fully in the shock stage and they will be there for much longer if you had over communicated all the expectations up front. So,
well, I just want to clarify. I have a definition I've always used for over communicate, because that's a subjective range at times. And so we'll go like, hey, just over communicate. Well, if you only talk once, that's over communicates twice, and that's still not enough. Yeah. So I always say early and often. Early. What does early mean? Before it happens. If it's waiting before it happens, you're too late. If it already happened, it's gone. Early and often. What is often? What is the number of often? As often as you need, as often as it matters, as often as there's frustration or shock or denial or any of those feelings. Early and often, just do it.
Well, and it's not just talking, it's having a conversation, it's communicating the vision and what's happening, yet asking questions, asking for clarification, allowing for feedback. It's all of that. Sometimes people think communicate. I'm just spewing. Yet it really is coming alongside someone, having empathy, understanding, asking questions, because as a leader, we're charging ahead. Yeah, what about the people on our team? What are they feeling? What's going on with them?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, as leaders, how do you navigate those conversations, thinking about this change curve, like the conversations that get emotional with team members when you're pushing change? How do you navigate? Obviously, having
just bring tissues. It's fine.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I think first and foremost, I mean, I think Mary just said it really well. And Eric did earlier as well. Is listen. What you have to be open to it. You have to allow it to happen. Asking really impactful questions to get past I just don't want to do this, or I don't like this. But why? What is the fear? What are you afraid of losing? Why are you so attached to this? What's below the surface there? And then actively caring enough to address it multiple times,
Yeah.
and not just this one conversation solved it, I'm good. Is like, because that emotion's still there, whether at the end of that conversation, a conversation doesn't fix it. At least, you learn that in my marriage after a nice swift hour and a half is, if I'm upsetting something or I'm doing something, it doesn't just fix it by having a conversation. It's that openness and creating a safe place. And there's all those other things that we do as leaders. But if someone's struggling, Mary said it best, being with them, just walking with them through it. And if we're viewing change as we're doing it, we're already off.
A lot of the times I've had those conversations, what it really just boils down to is just like, well, I just don't know why we have to change this. Like there's just a innate fear or uncomfortableness of change. They're like, well, why don't we just keep doing it how we're doing it? So as a leader, it allows you to like have the conversation to explain the forethought and like all those things that come with the change, so that your team isn't just like, oh, they just like to change shit all the time. Like that's just what they do. It's like, no, there's purpose. I mean, there should be purpose and reason behind it, and giving that opportunity to explain it.
I read a book and it had something to do the way she connected the change. I think it was Dr. Carolyn Leaf who switched off my brain or something like that. But the way she took our brain is that we have two different parts of it. The first part needs stability, and it needs to know that we're safe. So if you look at the change curve, if you see people who are shock, denial, frustration, anger, depression, that numbness, it's because they're craving stability. Once we have stability, once we know the whys, once we feel safe, then the next side of our brain goes, oh, I need growth and we need creativity. But we can't have that if we don't have stability. And in that, so you walk alongside what Austin was saying, you uncover what is that fear? What's the biggest thing that's keeping them stuck or in that space so that they can move forward?
I also, so with this, invariably, that's not the right word. Invariably.
I don't know what word you're attempting to say there.
Undoubtedly, there will come the question.
Rest
that,
assured.
what do I do, especially a middle manager, right? They may not have all the information or have the ability to disclose all the whys or get into it. And two things there. One is, if you've done the work at building trust prior to the moment, then you're going to be a lot better space where you go to them and you go, look, I can't give you all the details on this. We're turning left. And I want you to know, from everything I'm seeing, I buy into it. If you don't buy it, what do you do when you're in that spot and you don't buy into it? You got to go, we're turning left. I'm learning more about this as we go. But I wanted to give you the information as soon as I could. And as I gather more, I'm going to give you more, yet just so you know, it's coming. And I'm doing it to support and help them, not coming in going, hey, we're going left. That's the way it is. It's how we deliver it, how we say the words, how we show care. And they go, what? We're going left. And you go, it's okay. We're going to figure this out. I will get more information. I just wanted you to know up front. Don't freak out. Let's stay in the same. Well, don't freak out. They'll probably freak out. But, and the reason I'm saying that is because so often people are in a spot where they can't do all these steps. Either they don't have the time, they don't have the information, they don't have the power to give the information, whatever it is. If you built the trust, it's helpful. If you haven't built the trust and you have to make a major change, expect pushback. Expect it.
Yeah.
If you expect them to just submit and buy in when you haven't given them enough information to do that and haven't built the trust to do it, you're crazy. Like, and if you hire someone that just buys in without that information, they're just a yes person, and you're not going to be getting creativity. They're just a functional person that gets things done, and they just go, okay. And they don't probably even care that much about the job. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but I mean, it's like, oh, okay, I have to change something. Fine. We care. We put time and energy into this. If we care, you're going to push back.
Yeah, I think too,
and then
your
control
point.
what you can control.
Yeah. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Mary. I was just going to say, as far as assumptions go, be careful too. If you're middle management, we often put ourselves in assumption. I was discussing with a leader the other day, and they said, sometimes it is this way. I said, okay, well, have you ever had the conversation to not have it be that way? Well, no. It just is that way. Well, how do you know? You know, and I think and it sounds humorous when we think about it, but there's a lot of assumptions that we make. Well, they won't give me the information. They won't tell me why. They won't be patient with me and understanding. They won't accept the pushback. Well, if you never attempt it, you'll actively never know. Now, it's what we do in that conversation that matters, Eric, to your point. Like, it's how we approach it. It's how we navigate it. It is how we control what we can control in our behaviors and how we show up there. However, if we don't even ask the questions to the people that are bringing the change. So yes, there's a leader's responsibility in order to proactively get the information. But if you're in that spot too, go see if you can get the information you need in order to buy in. If you have all these questions coming from your team members as you're explaining this, bring that back. Say, hey, I'm having all of these questions. I'm unsure how to handle this. And there's that vulnerability-based trust that begins to either grow or begins to deteriorate or expose itself. And we got to be cautious.
One time I had, similar to what we're talking about here, someone asked me, they had a manager who is basically dictating to them the change. And then, so it was several managers. So you got a manager or director to the manager to the employees that need to change. And the directors basically were turning left. And there wasn't a space for them to go back to him and say, why are we turning left? That wasn't the way they led. It was my way, the highway kind of a thing. And so then they turn around and they go back to the team. And what that leaves, what they were talking about was, well, for me to still have credibility and be reputable, I basically had to say, hey, I don't know anything and I don't buy into this. And it becomes a bit of gossip and almost back talking because they don't have it. Yeah. And so the answer there, by the way, was you have to go back to this director and you've got to have the conversation and be willing to. That's what these people are counting on you for. And you go in and you go, hey, I'm not getting anywhere with you. I get it. And if you don't want to tell me, like, you got to have, or depending on their personality and who they are, but you got to at least have the conversation and be willing to go there. And if they go, yeah, I don't care, blah, 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 go past them. Like, and you go, well, my whole job's dependent on it. Why are you working at a place that doesn't respect you enough, give you enough value or credibility, and shuts you down like that to where you're having to gossip about the people because you can't set people up for change correctly?
You know, so I've seen that, actually know someone, and they're in a company. They're actually looking at going public. And so there's been all this change. This person was brought into this role as a expert in the role. And they changed his director. The director doesn't give him any information, doesn't communicate. This person has been very, very loyal to the company. And at the same time is creating this rift because he did that. He went to the director and said, I just want to know. Like, I want to know what's going on, what's expected. And the guy was just like, you know, you'll know when you know. And he's at the place of retirement. And so I look at people who aren't in a leadership role, so to speak, and they're in a company and they're struggling because there's a ton of change. There's loyalty, yet it's creating this disengagement. Yeah. And so my words of advice was figure out what you can control. Yeah. The people that you work with, because you're a light, you're an influence to them. So what can you do? Not what you can't do, because the more we get focused on what we can't do, we spiral. And then the change curve, we're stuck because we crave stability. And it was awesome because there was some things happen. He started focusing on that. And there was a shift. There was little tiny shifts that came in, enough to where they started becoming more engaged within the company. But when we look at leadership and we talk about the leader, the manager, everything rises and falls on us as leaders. We have a responsibility to lead the ship, so to speak, because the people on our teams that we're leading, they're out there going, yo, I just want to work for you, but I don't know what you're asking me to do. And I'm craving this stability. And who knows what's going on in their world. So if you can breathe, communicate what you can, build that trust, build that relationship, come alongside them, show care and empathy and support, you're going to help them go through it faster.
Not always possible. Some people just don't want to lead from that place. I guess that's what I was saying. If you're
Right.
in that spot, which is what you were talking about, and you're in that spot, of course, I always get, this is terrible, but I go back to, if I'm in that spot, I get he's near or she is near retirement, and that's different, maybe, but you get what you tolerate. And if you're going to tolerate it, I don't know. I push back on tolerating it. It's like, but that's me.
Yeah. So you go into the inner metrics, which we just did last week, I think, right? We're going to do the podcast the week after this.
Yes.
So high D's, that's what you are. You're like, fine, bring it. Let's go. And you'll stand up and you'll change. High S, high C's, they need time. They need data. They hate change just for the sake of change.
Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody's like you, Eric.
Oh,
Or
thank you.
Austin.
Can't
Or
swing your
me.
big D around like that.
Yeah.
All right, cutting that out of the podcast. All right.
I just like to change things on Connor for fun to see what he'll do. Earlier, I forget what we said. I said, "Hey, I said, can you add the change curve into this?" And Connor literally he freezes. He's just for a minute. I was like, "Look at that! I broke his brain."
That's my processing phase. Remember the episode about imposter syndrome where I wasn't ready to talk about it? Just like,
yeah, it was a good time. It was good. It was awesome.
Well, any final thoughts as we wrap up this first episode on change management? Any tools that maybe we didn't get to that you were thinking about earlier on, or any encouragements for those going through big change?
I think just be cautious to not ever put a label on your people. And they can't do change well. They don't do change well. They are not good change agents, and they're not great. Because when we get to that spot, we are excusing our own poor behavior in the midst of, or on the back of them not reacting well. We can make change, and I believe this with my whole heart. I've seen it in so many different ways. Good leaders make hard things look easy. Change is hard. And good leadership overcomes hard change every time. And so if it is hard, look in the mirror. And that's hard to say, but I have to do that every single day as well. Because I love creating change. And if it's hard and it's not easy and there's a lot of emotional nonsense, you can ask Connor. I'll call him randomly and go, man, this isn't going well. What did I do wrong? Or this feels harder than it should be. What am I doing? Where am I going? Find a confidant, find a friend, find somebody, ask, get feedback on you, because that's where the change is being challenging. So
super good.
Yeah, my last thoughts or words, so to speak, is that if you're going through change, focus on what you can control and do those little things. Whatever you can control, focus on that.
Yeah.
I'd say my thought gets into the golden rule. It's like, treat others as you want to be treated. If you can truly empathize and be in their shoes and have empathy towards it, it might change your approach as to how you're working with them. Just because you don't get upset over that level of change doesn't mean that they don't.
Yeah.
And I think the only other thing that just popped in my head is, if you're if you want to bring change as a leader in your organization, change doesn't have a necessary speed. And so I think a lot of times we get frustrated because change isn't going as fast as we want it to, or in vice versa, it's going slower than we want it to. And so as a leader, we get frustrated. And that's what causes us to look at what we don't control well, or how it's not going, or that also gets us into a non-democratic state, or all of these negative behaviors. And so change doesn't have a time frame. And be comfortable in that, ability or inability to navigate through that change, because people take time. Change takes time, and if it's not going as fast, it's okay.
That's good.
Yeah, I like it. Cool. Alrighty. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you join us next week. Like we teased at the beginning, we have Jen Bagley joining us next week, and she brings a lot of practicality through her own business over the years of her figuring out how to do change as a big change agent in her business.
She's a high D.
Yeah.
She's a very high D. And now
very high D.
Everything in her business is changing because of AI. Like everything in her business.
Yeah. And if you want to see the change curve graphic, we'll have it in the show notes of this episode.
Yeah, also, send us your stories of change, positive and negative. Podcast at drivenleadership.com.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.